speaking with Pulin Sangvhi, the Assistant Dean and Director of the Career Management Center for the Stanford Graduate School of Business. Pulin, I'd like to begin by asking you about how is the recruiting of our students evolving?
We at the GSB have been observing a generational shift in how recruiting is happening that has been characterized by four themes that to us are very exciting individually and also very exciting in terms of their aggregate implications for how our students are finding opportunity. The first theme is that our students are diversifying and fragmenting across a much broader range of opportunities than they ever have historically. If you had rewound the clock 20 years, you would have found that many of our students were pursuing opportunities in the same industries and with the same companies. But what we've now seen has been a proliferation of opportunities and a much wider playing field upon which our students play. This has been marked by the fact that we have 600 students who are seeking to join new organizations between our first year and second year MBA class. And last year we found that among these 600 students, there were 367 organizations that hired at least one of them, which means that about 80% of our employer base now will only hire one student in any given year. It's also manifested by the fact that many more of our students are pursuing starting enterprises of their own. In the last 2 years, we found that about 15% of our graduating class have started companies upon graduation. A second theme that the generational shift is marked by is the fact that the way recruiting is happening is evolving from what you can think of as process-based to what you can think of as relationship-based. Historically, the way that most of our students found opportunities is by putting together a very narrow set of qualifications and credentials represented by their resumes and their transcripts, and then spending their time interviewing based on these credentials with people that they'd only just met during the interview process. Now recruiting has heavily shifted towards relationship-based, where students are building a web of connections, often with alumni and other people that they're meeting through their alumni, through the networks of the alumni that they're meeting. And the way that discussions are evolving are much more fluid and are often based on non-obvious criteria. And so the idea then that students can build their platform purely based on academic or professional qualifications narrowly defined is being displaced now by students building their case for selection on a much broader and more fluid set of both behavioral and personal characteristics in addition to their professional and academic credentials. So that leads me to the third generational shift, which is that our students and our employers are now thinking of the hiring process much more based on uniqueness, distinctiveness, and individualization rather than on narrow sets of criteria. If you think about how that plays out, it means that the way that our students think about building their platforms is much more based on their uniqueness and their individuality, which come together in unique personal brands. And if you think about how the employers are approaching it, they're now willing to make decisions based on a much broader range of criteria, and they will often find through these more fluid discussions something unique in the person they hire that becomes the sort of spiky reason that they're making their decision to hire the person. And then finally, the last theme of the generational shift has been the strong shift towards globalization. We now find that about 40% of our incoming class at the Graduate School of Business are students who are coming from international markets to study with us. And we're finding that about 20% of our graduating class in recent years are now going outside of North America for their first job after graduation. And that will increase exponentially as these alumni advance through their careers. All these themes together are very exciting for us because they lead to a great sense of empowerment and opportunity that represents a much broader playing field than our students have ever had the chance to play on before.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. So globalization, you mentioned that as your last theme. How does that change the game for both students and workers? Let's begin by talking about the student graduating today. How likely is it for the student to work globally? And by working globally, does that mean actually working in other countries or working for companies owned elsewhere? What trends are emerging here?
We require, as part of our academic experience, for all of our students to get exposure during their 2 years in the MBA program to a country that they have not had previous exposure to. So this manifests either by our students taking what we call our global study trips during their winter or spring holidays, or it means that they participate in what we call a G-Mix, which is a 4-week internship opportunity that the school helps arrange for them in a country that they've not had prior exposure to. The premise behind giving our students this exposure has been that for every single one of our students during the course of their career, globalization will be an important theme that plays out. It'll play out partly because many of them will work in countries that are outside of North America. It will also play out because many of them will be working with global teams as in the organizations that they're part of, and most of them will be selling products and services into global marketplaces. So as we think about our students addressing these themes, familiarity and comfort with globalization will be a critical part of their experience. We certainly expect that in addition to the 20% of students who are working outside of North America at graduation, a much, much broader range of them will be continuing to get this exposure during the course of their careers, and we want them to be ready to embrace these opportunities and to have comfort for where these opportunities will take them.
So you describe a much more diverse workforce than in the past. What does that mean for a prestige institution like Stanford's Graduate School of Business?
It's important to recognize that diversity is not just an attributional element the way that we've normally thought about it. We often think about diversity as being confined to ethnic or gender or global characteristics. But we really think of diversity at the Graduate School of Business as being a proxy for individualization and personalization. We think that each of our students is a unique individual, and that our role as a school is to celebrate and help our students build platforms based on that individuality. And so as we think about how we run our MBA program and how we run our Career Center, it really is based on this idea of personalization, helping our students figure out what makes them unique, what matters most to them, what are the ways that they want to engage with the world, what are the things that they're most passionate about, and then what are the unique elements and attributes that they can bring to the world. What is the spiky identity and the things that make them unique, that can make them uniquely situated to solve a large problem that they're going after. And our role as the school is to help them discover that about themselves, and then help them connect in very personalized, individualized ways with the opportunities that will help them to forge their own unique path. And so diversity is the heart of what makes the university and what makes the Graduate School of Business successful. And I think our core role as an institution is to help our students build platforms based on their uniqueness.
So what about the foreign worker? We're seeing the U.S. struggle in terms of its immigration policy. We essentially import students from around the world but require them to leave after their studies have concluded. Do you think that will change?
I certainly think that that is one of the most important questions that our political system has to get its arms around in the near term, because the trend of global movement of talent, I think, is going to mirror the trend of global movement of information. If you think about how information moves between countries and between borders now, it's very fluid in a way where information can most get to the place where it most needs to be in a way that we don't artificially control or try to put barriers around. And I personally think that that's going to happen in the global economy in terms of the movement of talent. We're going to find that both U.S.-born and international workers are going to want the flexibility and the fluidity to move in their careers and also move against projects back and forth in the ways that most make sense in addressing the global marketplace. And if we put artificial barriers and if we make it difficult for people to navigate that movement, I think we're going to find that that's going to put artificial structural barriers in the way that the economy needs to function. And so I certainly believe that the political system is going to have to get its arms around this as the economy rapidly evolves and as globalization happens in force.
The e-portfolio gives a lot that the standard transcript doesn't. What is that, and how does it fit in?
So I referenced two generational shift themes, one being that recruiting is shifting from being process-based to being relationship-based, and one being that hiring is often now based on areas of distinctiveness or spikiness or uniqueness and individuality rather than on the baseline credentials that we often think hiring is based on. What many employers would articulate is that one of their greatest sources of inefficiency in recruiting at universities is that because most of the information they're exposed to is very cookie cutter, based in things like grades, based on things like very standard credentials, when they first meet a student and they're first trying to have those interactions, that is often the only thing that they can base those early discussions on. And as a result of that, they often are not in a position to be able to identify those sources of uniqueness and personal fit and personality that end up becoming critical to a person's ability to succeed in a role. I think where the real power of the e-portfolio is the ability to fluidly and flexibly present parts of the student profile that wouldn't otherwise be reflected on the transcript. Things like their involvements in activities that are meaningful to them, their ability to be leaders in areas that are outside of the classroom, and certainly their ability to express what they're passionate about in different parts of their Stanford experience. And I certainly think that, having been a former recruiter myself, having access to that information ahead of the interview would allow me to ask much more thoughtful and personalized questions that would really let me to get to know the candidate as a person in a way that would help me to really hone in on some things that would not otherwise come out of the standard interview.
Pulin, your background includes work with McKinsey & Company, the global management consulting firm, that in combination with this role at Stanford must have given you a unique perspective on globalization. So how are the demands on the student graduating from a higher ed institution today going to change?
I think that certainly one of the greatest attributes that all of our students will need will be their ability to ask questions and engage with the world as critical analytical thinkers. I think that one of the necessary and what can be a very positive element of the move towards globalization has been that the world has moved to a place now where things are changing very quickly, where the dynamics in business and in other fields are rapidly evolving, and where there's a great deal of uncertainty on how things will evolve going forward. And for a student to be able to address that effectively, I think that what they need to be able to do is embrace that uncertainty, be able to ask thoughtful questions against that uncertainty, and then be able to think out of the box and in creative ways to come up with solutions that have flexibility and fluidity and the ability to adapt to those rapidly changing dynamics. And so I think that if you think about a student graduating today who has this ability to think out of the box and think creatively and to be a critical analytical thinker, the biggest thing that they have to get their arms around with globalization is basically becoming familiar enough with the languages, the cultures, and the dynamics of other markets to be able to navigate them thoughtfully and be able to address all of that uncertainty in a thoughtful and informed way.
Well, this magazine covers the subject of student and worker document portability. And while the internet is an amazing tool, it's also the source of attention from hackers and others taking advantage of its openness. So isn't making official student records a risky business?
When the internet started to become deeply pervasive and integrated within all of our lives, we were faced with this dilemma across everything that matters. We face it across our medical records. We face it across our credit histories. We face it across all of our financial information. And as a society, we have had to get our arms around the fact that the world is changing very quickly. And do we sort of run away from all of this change, or do we embrace it and then thoughtfully learn how to manage the challenges of security and integrity of data? I certainly think that academic information and all of the information that is embedded in the e-portfolio, I think that is no different than healthcare or financial records or credit histories. I think that it's a matter of us embracing the change quickly and early on, thoughtfully thinking about how to structure it in a way where we can make the data as useful and as dynamic as it can be, and then start to be early thinkers in how we maintain security and integrity of the data. And it's a solvable problem because some of the best minds have already figured out how to make it solvable in all these other spheres. And so it's just a matter of us getting in front of it and embracing the possibilities and not running away from the change that will almost certainly happen whether we embrace it or not.
Well, thank you, Pulin. I've been speaking with Pulin Sangvhi, the Assistant Dean and Director of the Career Management Center for the Stanford Graduate School of Business.
Thank you very much.